Cole Anders had returned from deployment with scars he never spoke about, but nothing pierced him the way that moment did. As he stepped out of a small diner on a freezing Montana evening, a tiny 8-year-old girl chased after him through the snow. Her lips were blue, her braids messy, her thin sweater trembling against the wind. She held out his lost wallet with both hands. "Sir, I didn't take anything, but could you help me get some food? Not for me, for someone waiting at home." Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't fear him. They carried something far heavier than hunger, responsibility, the kind no child should bear. And right then, the Marine who thought he understood hardship realized he had walked into a story that would change everything. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, hit subscribe so you never miss another tale of courage, faith, and miracles. A pale winter dusk settled over Bozeman, Montana, laying a thin veil of frost across the quiet streets. Sergeant Cole Anders, a 36-year-old U.S. Marine with a lean, battle-hardened frame, pushed open the door of the small roadside diner and stepped into the cold. He carried himself with the kind of weary discipline that came from years in uniform. Broad shoulders held straight, jaw firm, short black hair brushed back with habitual neatness. Faint stubble darkened his square jaw, the kind that made him look older than his age, and his deep-set blue eyes held an exhaustion he never spoke about. He was a man who rarely smiled, who kept his pain tucked beneath layers of self-control shaped by a brutal childhood and the harsher lessons of war. At his side trotted Ranger, his 5-year-old German Shepherd K9 partner. Ranger had thick amber-toned fur, intelligent brown eyes, and a posture always slightly forward, always alert, always ready. The dog had the calm, disciplined temperament of a seasoned working dog but still carried a spark of gentleness around children, something Cole noticed but never commented on. As Cole tightened his coat against the creeping wind, he heard the soft crunch of hurried footsteps behind him. Light steps. Small. A child. He turned sharply, instinct trained by years of danger, and saw a little figure running toward him through the thin snow. A girl. No more than 8. She was tiny, underfed, her frame swallowed by a faded lavender cardigan and a thin cotton dress not built for Montana winters. Her messy chestnut-brown hair was braided unevenly as if she had done it herself, and her pale skin had the translucent look of a child who spent too many nights cold and hungry. Her lips were turning purple from the chill. When she reached him, she stopped abruptly and held out a worn brown wallet with both hands. "Sir," she said softly, "you dropped this. I didn't take anything. I promise." Her voice was steady, not trembling or pleading. It carried something practiced, the voice of a child who had learned to speak like an adult long before she should have. Cole blinked, taken aback. People in this world lied, manipulated, begged, demanded, but this girl simply stood there, honest and shivering. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She tucked her thin arms against her chest as if to preserve what warmth she had left. "Emma," she said. "Just Emma. No last name." Cole took his wallet, checked it, nothing missing, and looked back down at her. "Do you need something?" She shook her head. Not timid, determined. "Just, if you could maybe get me some food? Not for me, for someone waiting at home." Ranger stepped forward then, sniffing the air around the girl. His ears twitched, posture stiffening. A low rumble formed in his chest, not aggression, but warning. Ranger rarely reacted like this unless he smelled sickness or danger. Cole lowered a hand, calming him. "All right," he said quietly. "Wait here." Inside the diner, he ordered a hot meal to go. Soup, bread, something warm, ignoring the surprised look from the teenage cashier who recognized him as the Marine who rarely spoke and never ordered takeout. When he returned outside, Emma held the food with both hands like it was something sacred. She didn't open the container, didn't take a bite. She just nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir. I'll bring it to her." Her. A grandmother? A sick parent? Something in Emma's eyes, too old, too tired, pushed at memories Cole didn't want to revisit. Memories of empty kitchens, cold nights, fear. A woman's gentle voice whispering that everything would be okay, even though it never was. "Where do you live?" he asked. She hesitated. "Just close." Her small boots crunched through the snow as she walked away, carefully, guarding the food. She didn't look back. That was the detail that hit him hardest. Children usually checked to make sure adults followed, but she walked like someone used to doing everything alone. Cole's instincts tightened. Ranger, too, stayed rigid, staring after her with focused eyes. "You smell something?" Cole murmured. Ranger's ears twitched, another quiet growl. Danger sensed, not from Emma, but around her. That was enough. "Let's go," Cole said. They followed at a distance, careful not to frighten the girl. Emma walked with the familiarity of someone who had memorized every crack in the sidewalk, the walk of a child who traveled alone often. The bright downtown lights faded as she moved into older neighborhoods. Houses sagged, windows were boarded, chain-link fences rusted. This part of Bozeman wasn't on tourist brochures. A woman carrying groceries recognized Emma and gave her a sad, tired nod, the kind adults gave when pity felt useless. Cole's chest tightened. Emma turned down a narrow side street lined with aging cabins, their roofs heavy with snow. She finally stopped in front of a small wooden house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. A single dim light flickered inside. She forced the front door open slowly, trying not to make noise, and called softly, "Grandma, I'm back." Cole froze. That voice, that name, Grandma. Something old and buried stirred painfully in him. Because once, long ago, he had whispered the same word in the doorway of another small home, asking for help from the one person who cared whether he lived or died. He stepped closer, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Through a crack in the faded curtains, he saw a thin woman sitting on an old sofa wrapped in a blanket. Her silver hair was pulled into a messy bun. Her face was pale, cheeks sunken, eyes dim with exhaustion yet still carrying a familiar warmth. Margaret Lee. The breath left Cole's chest. She was older now, frail, but her soft brown eyes were unmistakable. This woman, this tired woman, had once given him the only safe place he had known. She had bandaged his cuts when his father drank too much. She had cooked for him when his cupboards were empty. She had held him while he cried through storms no child should endure. She had disappeared when he was 12, and he had never understood why. Now here she was, sick, starving, barely breathing, being kept alive by a little girl who should have been playing on playgrounds, not caring for a dying grandmother. Emma knelt beside her and offered the food with a proud smile. Margaret lifted a trembling hand, cupped Emma's cheek, whispered something too soft for Cole to hear. Ranger whined softly beside him, sensing the emotional quake inside his handler. Cole swallowed hard. He didn't know whether to step inside or run away. The past clawed up his throat, the boy he used to be, the man he had forced himself to become, colliding violently. He clenched his fists. He took a step toward the door. Before he could knock, a sharp crack split the quiet evening air, wood groaning under weight. Cole's eyes shot upward. The cabin roof sagged dangerously beneath the heavy snow. Another crack, louder. Ranger barked sharply, ears pinned back. Something was wrong. Something was about to fall, and Emma, Margaret, were standing right under it. The moment Cole stepped through the crooked doorway, a draft of cold air swept over him, carrying the faint smell of damp wood and medication long expired. The dim light from a single lamp flickered, revealing the small, cramped living room where Margaret Lee sat upright on the sagging sofa, wrapped in a wool blanket that was too thin for a Montana winter. Her silver hair, once full and strong, now hung loosely around her temples, and her cheeks were hollow, the fragile skin stretched tight over bone. Her brown eyes, though tired and sunken, widened the instant they met his. "Cole?" she whispered, her voice cracked and incredulous, as if the name itself was a memory she no longer trusted. He swallowed. "It's me, Margaret." Emma, the tiny 8-year-old girl in the lavender sweater, hurried to her grandmother's side. She placed the warm food down and touched the woman's hand with a tenderness far beyond her years. Cole realized then that the girl's strength came not from innocence, but from necessity. Margaret lifted trembling fingers toward him, her hand shaking from weakness. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Cole moved closer, lowering himself carefully onto the arm of the sofa. Up close, he could see the deep lines in Margaret's face, etched not by age but by a lifetime of struggle. At 67, she had the build of a woman who had always been slender, but now looked dangerously thin. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale an effort. "I didn't know you were here," Cole said, his voice low, strained. "If I had known—" She raised a finger weakly. "How could you know? Your life? It moved far away from all of this." Her eyes drifted around the small room, as if embarrassed to show him her reality. The wallpaper peeled in wide strips, a draft seeped through the broken window pane. The refrigerator door was slightly ajar, revealing nothing but a carton of milk and a half-eaten apple. A single old space heater buzzed in the corner, unable to heat even one room of the house. Emma shifted uneasily, as if afraid Cole might judge the place. Cole noticed her tug the cardigan tightly around her thin frame, the sleeves too short for her long arms. "Have you eaten today?" he asked. Emma hesitated, shaking her head. "Grandma tried to make soup this morning, but she got too tired." Cole suppressed the ache twisting in his chest. Ranger, standing beside him, sniffed the air again, then gave a soft whine, a warning about illness, something he had been trained to identify. "Emma," Cole said gently, "why aren't you in school?" The girl bit her lip. "I go sometimes, but Grandma needs me here. I don't want her to fall." The simplicity of the explanation shattered him. No child should carry shackles like that. Cole stood and crossed the small room, startled when a cold draft pushed through the splintering wall. He scanned his surroundings with the practiced eye of a soldier, finding danger in every corner. Loose wires, uneven floors, mold, structural decay. This place wasn't just uncomfortable. It was unsafe. "Let me help you clean up," he said, already rolling back his sleeves. Margaret started to protest, but a sudden tremor in her hands silenced her. Cole lifted a pile of old newspapers and set them aside, then moved toward a dusty cabinet. When he opened it, a small wooden box tumbled forward. He caught it carefully. The box was old, oak, with faded carvings. The moment he held it, something unspoken stirred inside him, the echo of a childhood long buried. "What's that?" Emma asked, curious. Margaret closed her eyes. "Something I should have given him years ago." Cole opened the lid. Inside lay papers yellowed with age, a custody request form from 24 years ago, several carefully folded letters, each sealed but brittle at the edges, a faded photograph of a small boy sitting at Margaret's kitchen table, smiling shyly at a bowl of stew. Cole inhaled sharply. The boy was him. 12 years old, bruised on the cheek, but smiling with a softness he barely remembered having. "I tried," Margaret whispered, voice trembling. When things got bad, I filed to be your guardian. But they denied it. Said I was too poor, too old, not a relative." Cole stared at the denied stamp on the form. His vision blurred. "And the letters?" His voice cracked. "I visited your house many times. Your father always said you weren't home. He shut the door in my face, and I believed him when he said you were better off without me." Cole gripped the photo until his knuckles whitened. "He lied," he said, anger rising from a place so deep it frightened him. "He lied to both of us." Before Margaret could respond, a loud metallic slam echoed from outside. Emma flinched. "I left the trash bag by the back door. I forgot." "It's okay," Cole said softly. "We'll take it out together." But Emma shook her head. "I can do it. Grandma says I should help." Then, grabbing the small trash bag, she hurried out the back door. Cole moved to follow her, but Margaret gently touched his arm. "She's proud," she whispered. "Let her feel useful." Still, something about the icy wind pushed unease into Cole's gut. Ranger's ears perked, his attention shifting toward the back of the house. A moment later, a faint thud echoed through the yard. Then, a muffled cry. Cole froze. Ranger launched forward, barking sharply, the trained alert he used when he detected immediate danger. Cole sprinted out the door. The backyard sloped downward toward a narrow stream hidden beneath thin sheets of early winter ice. He spotted Emma near the water's edge, her small boots slipping on the glassy surface. "Emma!" Cole shouted. She looked up, just in time for the ice beneath her to crack. A spiderweb of fractures shot outward. Her eyes widened in terror. The ice collapsed. She plunged into the freezing water. Ranger reached the bank first and leapt into the stream, the splash sending icy droplets into the air. He swam powerfully toward the girl, grabbed her coat sleeve gently in his teeth, and tried to keep her afloat. Cole didn't hesitate. The water was deadly cold, enough to kill a grown man in minutes. But he dove in head first. The shock stole his breath instantly. Every muscle seized, but he forced his body to move, toward Ranger, toward Emma's outstretched hands, toward the small life slipping under the surface. He reached them just as the current tried to pull Emma away. Wrapping one arm around her, he braced his feet against the shattered edge of ice and shoved the girl upward. "Hold on to me," he commanded. Ranger dug his claws into the snowy bank and pulled backward with all his strength. With a final heave, they broke free of the water. Cole dragged Emma to the shore, lifting her into his arms. She coughed violently, trembling uncontrollably. Her skin was ghostly pale, lips blue. "Chu, Dung," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Don't leave. Don't leave me like everyone else." Cole pulled her close, pressing her to his warming chest, his own breath shaking. Something inside him broke wide open, not pain, but recognition. Recognition of the same fear he once had, recognition of a child abandoned by the world. "You're safe," he murmured. "I'm right here." Behind him, Ranger pressed close, tail low, eyes full of worry. When Cole carried Emma back toward the house, the cold wind cut at his face, but it wasn't the storm outside that unsettled him. It was the storm building inside. Because saving her didn't just pull him into her life, it pulled him back into the past he had spent decades trying to outrun. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing about his life would ever be the same again. The night settled over Bozeman in a quiet, heavy stillness, a kind that made even the wind seem afraid to stir. After the terrifying rescue at the frozen creek, Cole refused to let Emma and Margaret spend another night alone in a house that was barely holding itself together. He remained with them until the early hours, fixing what he could, patching broken boards, cleaning out clutter, securing loose windows, and inspecting the outdated wiring that snaked like brittle veins behind the walls. The wires were cracked, cloth-wrapped, dangerously outdated relics from decades ago. Cole made a mental note to come back with proper tools in the morning. But for now, exhaustion pulled at his bones. He slept lightly on the old armchair in the living room, Ranger curled on the floor beside him, the dog's warm amber fur rising and falling in steady breaths. Margaret and Emma slept in the bedroom at the end of the hallway. Before closing their door, Cole had checked on them twice. Margaret lay curled beneath heavy quilts, her breathing shallow but even. Emma lay close beside her grandmother, one small arm draped protectively across Margaret's chest. Cole's chest tightened at the sight. Children shouldn't have to be guardians. Hours passed quietly. Then Ranger's breathing shifted. His ears twitched, his body went rigid. Cole's eyes snapped open out of instinct before the dog even moved. Ranger shot to his feet, hackles raised, a deep, vibrating growl building in his chest. Cole stood. "What is it, boy?" A second later, the smell hit him, faint at first, a burnt tang drifting like a warning. Smoke. Cole's training surged through him. He rushed into the hallway, heart pounding. A faint haze drifted above the floorboards, illuminated by the moonlight bleeding through the old windows. Ranger barked sharply and sprinted toward the kitchen. Cole followed and saw it. A small fire licking up the wall behind the stove, orange and angry, fed by the faulty outlet he had inspected earlier. Sparks crackled like snapping bones. The wallpaper around it curled inward as if recoiling from the flames. "Damn it," Cole whispered. He grabbed the nearest pot, filled it with water from the sink, and hurled it at the fire. The flames hissed but didn't die. Instead, they crawled higher, devouring the old wood panels like they had been waiting for the chance for years. Thick smoke began to billow. The fire was spreading faster than the house could handle. "Margaret! Emma!" Cole shouted. Ranger spun around, barking urgently, racing toward the bedroom. Cole sprinted after him. The hallway was already filling with smoke, thick as fog. Cole covered his mouth with his sleeve as he crashed through the nearly warped door of the bedroom. Inside, Margaret and Emma were still asleep, unaware of the danger. "Wake up!" Cole barked. Emma jerked awake first, coughing at the smoke. "Chew, Cole?" He grabbed both of them. Margaret, light as a feather in his arms, Emma, clutching his sleeve with desperate fingers. The ceiling above them groaned and popped. Ranger barked, running in circles, guiding them toward the exit. Cole pushed forward blindly through the smoke, eyes stinging. Heat slammed against him, suffocating. He could barely see Ranger's silhouette in front of him. The living room burst into flames as they passed it. Wood cracked and fell in burning chunks. Sparks rained down like angry stars. "Follow Ranger," Cole shouted. "Stay behind me." He shielded the two with his own body as fire brushed dangerously close. Emma sobbed against his chest, trembling violently, but she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. And in that moment, he was. The front door was ahead, a dim outline beyond swirling smoke. Ranger stood there barking madly, urging them on. The ceiling gave one final groan. Cole didn't think. He lunged forward, throwing his entire weight past the doorway, pulling Margaret and Emma with him. They tumbled onto the snow-covered ground outside just as a massive portion of the roof caved inward with a roar. Flames exploded upward, sending sparks into the night sky like a twisted firework display. The heat scorched the air behind them. Cole rolled over in the snow, still clutching Emma and Margaret. Ranger pressed his wet nose against Emma's arm, whining and trembling from adrenaline. Emma clung to Cole, tears streaming down her soot-smudged cheeks. "You saved us. You saved us," she sobbed, her voice barely coherent. "Chuse kom roidi dunkong. Please, don't leave us." Her small hands fisted into his jacket with a desperation that stabbed straight into his soul. Cole felt something inside him fracture. Not break. Open. "I'm here," he said hoarsely, brushing soot from her hair. "I'm right here." But his relief shattered when Margaret coughed violently, a deep, terrible sound. Blood splattered against her blanket. Her body sagged, her eyes rolling back as she slumped into unconsciousness. "Margaret!" Cole shook her gently. "Stay with me." Ranger let out a distressed howl. Cole lifted Margaret into his arms, her frail weight barely more than the blanket wrapped around her. Emma stumbled beside him, crying as she held onto Ranger's fur for balance. There was no time to think, no time for fear. He rushed them into his truck and sped toward Bozeman General Hospital, every second stretching into agony. Margaret's breathing grew weaker, each inhale more labored than the last. When they arrived, a nurse, a tall woman named Jenny Carver, around 40, with freckled skin and sandy hair tied into a tight ponytail, rushed out to meet them. Her green eyes widened in alert concern when she saw the state of Margaret and the soot coating Cole and Emma. "Inside, now," Jenny ordered, her tone steady, authoritative. She radiated the calm efficiency of someone who had spent years facing emergencies without flinching. Doctors wheeled Margaret into the ER, attaching oxygen masks and checking vitals. Lights flashed. Medical alarms beeped. Cole stood in the hallway, Emma clutching his waist, tears still streaming silently. Ranger pressed against both of them, a steadying presence. A doctor emerged, a man in his early 50s named Dr. Alan Harrow, with graying hair, sharp eyes behind rectangular glasses, and the kind of composed seriousness that left no room for misinterpretation. He was tall, with a slightly stooped posture from long hours at the hospital, and his tone carried the gravity of someone who did not sugarcoat truth. "Are you family?" he asked. Cole opened his mouth, but Emma beat him to it. "He is," she whispered. Dr. Harrow nodded solemnly. "Her condition is severe. She has advanced pneumonia, untreated for too long. She's severely anemic, and showing signs of early-stage heart failure. We'll do what we can, but she's in critical condition." Emma broke down again, her sobs muffled against Cole's jacket. Margaret was placed into intensive care. Before they wheeled her through the doors, she briefly regained consciousness. Her hand reached weakly for Cole. He bent close so she could speak. "If I don't make it," she whispered, voice fragile as ash, "don't let Emma go into the system. She won't survive it. She's too afraid, too sensitive, too strong to be alone." Her eyes glistened with tears. "She needs someone who sees her, someone who stays." Cole felt his throat tighten painfully. "I won't let anything happen to her," he said, voice steady even as fear clawed at him. Margaret gave a faint nod and slipped back into unconsciousness as the doors closed between them. And as Cole stood holding Emma, her tiny body trembling, her fingers curled tightly into his sleeve, he knew he wasn't promising out of obligation. He was promising out of something far deeper, something that terrified him, something that felt like fate. The morning frost clung lightly to the grass outside Bozeman General Hospital when Cole carried Emma through the automatic doors and toward the parking lot. She held Ranger's leash with one hand, the dog walking close beside her, protective, sensing the weight of everything that had happened. Cole glanced back toward the hospital windows where Margaret rested. For the first time since the fire, her breathing had steadied, though she was still dangerously weak. He had barely slept in days. The lines around his eyes had deepened, the faint stubble on his jaw had grown more rugged, emphasizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the hard focus in his blue eyes. Yet beneath the armor was a man whose heart was slowly softening in ways he hadn't expected. 2 days later, after countless tests, oxygen therapy, and close monitoring, Dr. Alan Harrow declared Margaret stable enough for temporary release, though he emphasized firmly that she needed constant supervision. Cole didn't hesitate. He arranged for a home nurse, covered medication costs, and brought Margaret and Emma to the small cabin he owned on the outskirts of Bozeman. The cabin was modest but warm, built of pine logs with a stone fireplace and tall windows that overlooked a field dusted with early spring snow. Inside, the air held the scent of burning cedar and fresh linen. Cole had cleaned tirelessly before bringing them home. He had never prepared a space for anyone before, but he found himself wanting this place to feel safe for them. Margaret was moved into the bedroom closest to the living area so Cole could hear her if she needed help at night. She looked frail lying beneath the thick quilt, her silver hair brushed neatly over her shoulders. Even so, there was more color in her cheeks than he had seen in weeks. A gentle knock came at the door that afternoon. The home nurse had arrived, Nora Bennett, a woman in her mid-50s with warm hazel eyes and shoulder-length auburn hair shot through with gray. She had a sturdy frame and the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades caring for difficult cases. Her hands were rough from work but gentle as she checked Margaret's vitals. "She's stable," Nora said after her evaluation, her voice firm yet kind. "But she needs rest, warmth, and someone she trusts nearby. You've done well bringing her here, Sergeant." Cole nodded, though praise always made him uncomfortable. As days passed, the cabin began to change, as if adapting to the new lives inside it. Emma found a small desk near the living room window where she drew quietly in the mornings while Ranger lay at her feet. She had her own room now, small but cozy, decorated with the colored pencils Cole had bought her. Her drawings, taped neatly on the wall, showed fields of flowers, bright suns, and 3 figures holding hands: a tall man, a little girl, and a silver-haired grandmother. Ranger always appeared beside them. Cole noticed the shift in her. Almost immediately, she woke with less fear. She laughed more. She ate full meals without being asked. She walked taller, as though a weight had been gently lifted from her small shoulders. One afternoon, after picking Emma up from school, Cole watched her race up the cabin steps with the easy joy of a child who finally felt safe. Her hair bobbed behind her, and her cheeks were flushed from the spring breeze. Ranger bounded after her, tail wagging. "How was school?" Cole asked as he followed her inside. Emma opened her backpack and proudly pulled out a new drawing. "We learned about homes today," she said, her voice bright. "So I drew this." Cole took the paper. His breath caught. It was a house, not the cabin, but a larger home with a wraparound porch, flower beds beneath the windows, and a yard big enough for Ranger to run through. It looked almost exactly like the house Cole had dreamed of as a child, back in the years when he thought dreams still meant something. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. Emma nodded, her eyes sparkling. "I think it's where we're supposed to live someday." He gently folded the picture, slipping it into his jacket pocket. His voice was soft, almost unrecognizable to himself. "Maybe we will." Over the next week, Cole found himself stepping into a role he had never imagined. He cooked breakfast with Emma perched on the counter watching him, her legs swinging. He drove her to school, walked her to the door, and saw her smile shyly at the teacher, a woman named Mrs. Karen Whitlow, short and soft-featured with curly dark hair and warm brown eyes. She always greeted Emma with a gentle pat on the shoulder. It reassured Cole that Emma was safe here too. Every evening, Cole returned home to the smell of warm soup simmering on the stove, Nora's doing, and the sound of Margaret humming faintly from her room. Her voice was weak, but it carried a comforting familiarity that wrapped itself around the house like an old quilt. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low, casting gold through the windows, Cole stepped outside onto the porch to breathe in the cool mountain air. Ranger followed him, sitting beside him with ears alert, watching the tree line in calm vigilance. Inside, Margaret awoke from her nap and slowly sat up. Her movement was noticed instantly by Emma, who rushed to her side and handed her a glass of water. "Grandma," Emma said, "look what I drew today." She held up another picture, 3 people in front of a house, the same house as before, but this time the sun was drawn larger, brighter. Margaret studied it, her eyes softening as she took in every line, every color. "It's lovely," she whispered, "and it makes me very happy." Then her gaze lifted toward the window, where she saw Cole standing on the porch, his posture slouched slightly with exhaustion, but softened by something gentler. Hope, perhaps. In his hand was the picture Emma had given, him days earlier. He unfolded it, stared at it for a long time, then slipped it deeper into his pocket, close to his heart. Margaret watched him quietly, and understanding washed over her. She had once prayed that the broken boy she knew would find someone to care for, and someone to care for him. She never imagined fate would bring him back here to them. Later that night, while Emma slept curled against Ranger on the rug, Margaret asked Nora to help her sit up. She wanted to speak to Cole alone. Nora stepped outside and called to him, her voice softened by respect. "She'd like to talk to you." Cole entered the dim room, lit only by a bedside lamp. Margaret's eyes reflected the warm glow, filled with a knowing sadness and a budding acceptance. "You're buying a house," she said softly. Cole froze. The folder in his backpack, the one containing listings he had been too afraid to show anyone, was no longer hidden. He must have left the zipper open earlier. Margaret continued, her smile faint but full of tenderness. "You're not helping. You're staying." Cole swallowed, emotion tightening in his throat. "I don't want to overstep." "You're not," she whispered. "Emma, she feels safe for the first time in her life, and you—" Her voice wavered. "You look like a man who has finally found something worth coming home to." Cole's eyes stung with emotions he wasn't accustomed to letting surface. "I just want to make sure she doesn't feel alone." Margaret reached for his hand, her fingers cold but steady. "She isn't. Not anymore." Cole nodded, unable to speak as the weight of her words settled deep into him, solid, undeniable. And for the first time, Margaret, once guarded and guilt-ridden, allowed herself to believe it. Emma had found her place, a home, a future, a family. Just as she drifted back to sleep, Cole stepped outside again, staring at the wide, dark sky. Ranger leaned against him as if sensing the shift inside his handler. Cole exhaled slowly. He knew, without question, that this was only the beginning. The first true spring morning after a winter that had nearly stolen everything arrived quietly, with the soft glow of sunlight melting the frost on the open fields near the west side of Bozeman. The sky was pale blue, streaked with gentle clouds, and the air carried the faint smell of damp earth waking from hibernation. Cole stood at the edge of the driveway of their new home, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets, watching Emma spin in delighted circles across the fresh lawn. The house itself stood 2 stories high, built in a classic Montana craftsman style. It had wide wraparound porches, white-trimmed windows, and a yard that stretched farther than Emma could run in a single breath. Cole had chosen it because Emma's drawing lived inside its walls, sunshine, laughter, and the possibility of healing. Because it held enough light for Margaret to sit and read. Because it had enough space for Ranger to run free. Because it was a home, not a shelter from disaster. Emma's small boots pattered across the porch as she dashed toward the backyard. Ranger, now fully recovered from the cold water rescue weeks earlier, bounded after her with long strides. His thick amber fur rippled in the sunlight, and each bark he let out was bright, unburdened, almost joyful. It was rare for a disciplined canine like Ranger to play like this, but something about Emma softened even the hardest instincts. Margaret sat in a wide-backed wooden chair on the porch, wrapped in a knitted shawl the color of sage. Her silver hair fell gently around her shoulders, brushed clean and soft. Her cheeks carried a faint blush of returning health. Though she was still thin and her breath occasionally trembled, she looked more alive here than Cole had ever seen her in the dim hospital room or the collapsing old house. Her eyes followed Emma's every movement, filling slowly with a warmth that felt like sunlight after decades of shadow. "Look at her," she whispered. "She finally laughs without fear." Cole turned toward her, leaning against the porch rail. There was a softness to his expression now, still stern around the edges, but less guarded. The weeks of responsibility, of late-night worries, of trying to build something stable had settled into his features. He seemed older, but stronger too, as if accepting a new purpose had carved something deeper and more grounded in him. "She deserves it," he said. "Both of you do." Margaret touched the thin blanket resting on her lap. "I never thought Emma would have anything like this. I never thought I would see her running in a yard again." Cole didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted toward the moving truck parked at the end of the driveway. It was nearly empty now. Only a small stack of boxes remained. Most of them were filled with Emma's drawings, Margaret's books, and a few old knickknacks Margaret had clung to through the hardest years. This house was the first place those items felt worthy, enough to be displayed, not stored in sadness. By noon, the sun was high, and the last of the furniture had been carried in by two local movers, one tall and thin with sandy blonde hair tucked into a cap, the other shorter with a stocky frame and a neatly trimmed beard. Their names were Owen Miller and Luis Navarro, simple, hard-working men in their 30s who nodded politely and didn't pry into the family's situation. Owen, quiet and slightly shy, worked with gentle hands, moving Margaret's few belongings as if they were made of glass. Luis brought a friendly energy, cracking light jokes that made Emma giggle as he helped set up her small bookshelf. Once the movers left, Emma tugged Cole's hand eagerly. "Come inside, I need to show you something." She led him into the living room where boxes were still scattered. The walls glowed with warm afternoon light streaming through tall windows. Carefully, she climbed onto a small stool and taped a large drawing onto the freshly painted wall above the mantel. It was a picture of 4 figures: a tall man with dark hair and a square jaw, a little girl with messy braids, a silver-haired grandmother, and Ranger sitting proudly beside them. All of them were standing in front of a house, the house they were in now. Emma stepped down and clasped her hands behind her back. "This is our house, so it should go on the wall." Cole felt something deep inside him settle, not break, not ache, settle, like a stone finding the bottom of a lake. "It's perfect," he said. Emma grinned, then dashed off to help Ranger explore the backyard again. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low enough to paint the porch gold, Margaret asked Cole to join her outside. She was wrapped in the same shawl, but her posture was straighter. Her breathing was easier. The weeks of care, warmth, and safety had begun knitting strength back into her frail frame. She waited until Cole sat beside her before speaking. "Do you remember," she began softly, "when you were 12, and you asked me something I couldn't answer?" Cole looked at her slowly, his chest tightening. He did remember. It was one of the clearest memories of his childhood, standing in her old kitchen, small and bruised and trembling, asking the question no child should ever have to ask. "Does anyone love me?" Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening. "You asked me that on a night when your father had thrown you out into the rain. You were shivering so hard you could barely speak, and I wanted to tell you, but I wasn't allowed. Your father told me it wasn't my place, that I shouldn't put ideas in your head." Cole closed his eyes, jaw tightening, the old hurt rising but softer now, dulled by time, reshaped by everything that had happened. Margaret reached out, placing her hand over his. Her hand was cold, but her touch steady, overflowing with years of unspoken affection. "But tonight," she whispered, "I can say it." Cole opened his eyes. "I love you, Cole. I always have. And I never stopped." The words hit him like a soft blow, knocking the breath out of him. He leaned forward, resting his head gently against her shoulder, just as he had done decades earlier on stormy nights when she was the only shelter he had. For a long moment, neither spoke. The porch creaked softly beneath them. Ranger lay at their feet, his warm fur brushing Cole's boots. Inside, Emma hummed quietly as she unpacked her new room. Margaret stroked Cole's hair with trembling fingers. "This house, this family, it's what you were always meant to have." Cole swallowed hard. There were no words big enough to hold the emotions swelling inside him. As night approached, Emma hung the last picture in the living room, 3 people and a dog sitting on a porch under a golden sky. She stepped back, hands on her hips, and declared, "Now the house is ours." Outside, the sun dipped behind the mountains, bathing the porch in molten gold. Margaret, Emma, Cole, and Ranger sat together in the warm glow, each touched by a piece that had been denied to them for years. A family not created by blood, but by survival, by kindness, by fate stitching together pieces that had once been broken. For the first time, all of them knew exactly where they belonged. Sometimes the greatest miracles are the ones we don't see coming. A lost girl returning a wallet, a broken soldier opening his heart again, a grandmother finding hope in her final winter. These moments are not coincidences. They are reminders that God works quietly, stitching lives together in ways we could never imagine on our own. And just like Cole, Emma, and Margaret, we all have days when we feel forgotten, uncertain, or alone. But even in those moments, God places people, opportunities, and second chances in our path, small signs that His love hasn't left us, not even for a heartbeat. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for more stories that remind us of the goodness still alive in this world. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you through every season of your life.